Hi there, everyone. So we're getting into conferencing season here in September 2024 when I'm first recording this. And I thought it might be helpful for those of you who are putting your research posters together to go through some basics of how to structure your poster, particularly to make the flow of information and your communication of whatever work you did a bit easier on the audience that you're going to be presenting to at whatever meeting you're going to be attending. One of the first things to keep in mind is checking the dimensions that are required for your poster. So the website for whatever meeting you're going to be attending, if you get the information about the poster session, or they may send you an email with details or something like that, and they're going to include the dimensions that your poster board, the thing you're going to put your poster up on, is going to be. You want to make sure that you are checking this and that when you're putting your poster together in whatever software you're using, that you're going to fit within those dimensions, especially if you're in some kind of poster competition, which there frequently are, especially for students. If you are going outside of those dimensions, it can lead to issues with effectively presenting the work that you're there to show everyone. So again, width, height, check the requirements on the website or information that the organization sends you, just to make sure you got that all dialed in. So layout essentials. Some of these things include your title. You're going to put your name, first and last name, probably whatever degrees you have, your other authors. Make sure that you are clear with anyone you've been working on this project with, whether or not they're going to be second, third. Presumably, if you're putting the poster together, you're the first author. Just making sure that everyone is clear who's going to be where as far as that list of authors, and then listing, as we're showing here, the institutions that each person belongs to. This is pretty standard stuff. Sometimes it'll be required to put in the logos, as we see right here, for the institutions that are represented on that poster. If there's a whole bunch of them, then you may be able to fit more of them kind of in this space, and you can change the kind of structuring of your title to accommodate that. But it's an easy way for folks who are walking around to recognize where it is that you are doing your work at. Part of the reason that's important is that these tend to be pretty small communities of people who are doing similar work, and they may know that there's a lab doing work with something that they're interested in at the school that you are coming from, or museum, or what have you. And so if they see the logo for that place, they may be more likely to stop and see what it is that you're working on. So it provides a bit of a recognizable visual for folks who are just kind of perusing these big poster halls. So laying out all the other stuff in your poster. So you're going to have some combination of text, images, and figures to communicate this work that you have been doing to the audience at the meeting that you're presenting at, whether it is like a smaller regional meeting or a very large national, even international meeting. These general rules hold pretty consistent. Now, that being said, don't feel that what I'm about to go through is some kind of set of hard rules. These are approaches that should be considered when you're putting your poster together. And this is not to say that you can't be more creative than this, but you want to make sure you're following some certain standards of practice for the sake of your audience so that they can more readily approach whatever the information is that you are presenting on. And one of the first things to talk about with this that a lot of folks do improperly, in my opinion, is they put too many words on their poster. So you should really not have more than about 600 words on your poster. If you have more than that, you probably have too many different things that you're trying to present on, and you need to focus a bit more. Or you're being needlessly wordy, and you should be able to, with some editing, chop down that volume of text pretty effectively. This may take some help from other people who are good editors, but you will need to reduce that amount of text. The reason why, if somebody comes up, unless they are really, really invested in whatever the topic of your poster is, like one of the 5 to 8 other people in the entire meeting who might really, really, really care about it, you're not going to get the people who are curious, but maybe not super invested in it. You're not going to get those people who are still valuable audience members. You're not going to get them stopping and reading it because it's just a wall of very small print. And that tends to kind of turn people off because it's going to take a while for them to kind of work their way through it. So try to keep your total text volume across your entire poster at around under 600 words. The boxes that I've got laid out here are mostly just to kind of demonstrate sections and layout. Again, you can arrange your poster in a lot of different ways other than this, but one of the things you want to make sure that you're doing is having a certain flow and having sections and things like that, just so your audience isn't looking for things and getting lost in the poster that you've put together. Your graphs are going to be really important too. So graphs, figures, charts, any visual element, you should be relying on these pretty heavily to tell the story of the work that you have been doing. I really strongly prefer the show over tell method You're standing there giving your poster presentation during those open hours. Now, some people may come to your poster when you're not there, and so having good explainer text that is clear and concise is still really important. But if you're not there, they're going to be relying on the full entirety of your poster, text, visuals, everything else, to get at what you have brought to the meeting. If you are there, you can kind of walk people through it, and that can help with folks, especially if they're not super familiar with what it is that you're working on. But your visual should very clearly show what it is that were the kind of the results of your study. And this can take a lot of different forms, but the main takeaway is that they should be easy to read, easy to understand. They don't need to necessarily be simple per se, but they should be clear. And if they're busy or messy, that's gonna your clarity is gonna definitely go down. So here we have about 600 words of text, just to kind of get an idea of what that means. You can see that's a lot of words. Even 600 words is quite a bit. If you can even get decently under that, I wouldn't say too far under it, but probably even between 5 and 600, maybe on the smaller end of that, you'll probably find that one, you're just being more concise with, again, the story that you're telling your audience about the work that you've done. And if somebody can get through your work with less of that friction, they're more likely to actually get through all of it, which is what you want. You want them to go from start to finish. Laying your visuals out, as we're kind of showing here, kind of doing this, you've got a kind of directional left to right flow to all the work that you're showing here. And so if you're allowing folks to kind of start over here, this is maybe your introductory text, letting them know what you did or some background information, and then you're moving into kind of the next stuff that they need to know. You've got some initial figures here that are showing them a visual component or a visual complement to whatever you've got over in this text box over here. And then you're moving up here, you're kind of expanding your story. This may be where you have a bit of information about your results as opposed to maybe something about your methods are over here. And then you're moving into kind of like the real big takeaway of what it is that you're doing. It's right dead center. This is like the big showcase thing of like, this is the cool thing that I found, or this is the cool thing that I did. And it's kind of what you're hanging the entire narrative of your poster on, and giving this lots of space so that it's going to really jump out at the people walking by, especially the people who you want to see it and hang around for a bit, because it's this nice big visual and be like, oh, I recognize what's going on here. That seems interesting. I'm going to stop and have a look at this and pay a bit more attention to it. Especially at big meetings, these poster sessions can be really, really large, and it can take a while to move through an entire poster hall. And so making it easy for somebody to make that decision of, I'm going to stop and talk to this person because I recognize this thing as something that is interesting, is really important. Again, this continuing narrative I'm talking about, try to make it easy on your audience. Keep them in mind, and remember that they're not an expert in this. You may know more about this than they do, especially the further along you go in your academic career. You very likely do know more about it than they do. So if you want them to be able to talk to you about it, you're going to have to make sure you're presenting it in a way where other experts, or even junior experts who are still like trainees, anyone at that meeting can hopefully see that, and if it's something that they might be interested in, they will recognize what it is you're doing fairly easily. So you're going from this, now we're kind of wrapping things up, we're getting some conclusions, and then we're dropping down here, and making sure that we're throwing in acknowledgments is really, really important. People that helped, people gave you access to research collections, helped with field work, helped you with literature review, gave you edits, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are really important to make sure you're giving those folks the credit that they are due for helping you complete this work. None of the science happens solo. There's always folks that are contributing to it. It might be an agency that gave you permits, whatever it may be. Make sure that you're remembering those folks and including them on your poster. A quick reminder that the font that you're using on your poster actually does matter. And so earlier we had a font that was maybe a little less than ideal. So we're going to move over to something that is a little bit friendlier on the eyes. It's a little bit bigger. The characters kind of stand out from each other a little bit more easily. And so, again, we're making things as easy as possible. You may have folks who have vision impairments, even if they're not real serious, some kind of vision impairment. English may not be their first language. And so, again, we're taking even these little things into consideration when we're building our poster to make sure that it is as friendly as possible to our audience. Now, sometimes putting in a background of some kind, like what we've got here, so you can see it's like a research collection, there's a bunch of fossils all back here. This is something that I've seen quite a bit on posters, and it can be done well. There's ways to do it where it looks nice and it complements what is going on. The thing you need to be careful of, and we're going to talk about this more with other situations later, is it being busy. It needs to not be distracting. If it is distracting, then your audience is going to be paying more attention to what's going on with this background that you've put in than they are to the work that you're presenting on. And that's not really going to help you communicate your work or effectively engage their attention. So what we want to do is keep our background simple. So we've got this very kind of flat but calm blue colored background here. And that's fine. That provides some light contrast between the background and our boxes over here. And so this is much easier on the eyes, and it allows you to still focus on what it is that's being presented on without it being literally a completely white poster with just words on and some figures. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Those can work very well too. Another option that you have is to use color to isolate different topics or different sections of your poster. So you can see here, we've got 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5 different kind of sections that this whole thing is built on. And so by using these different colored sections, it makes it a lot easier for folks to know, like, oh, these figures all go together here, or this stuff is all related. So you're, again, making life easier for your audience as they're moving through your poster and not creating little friction points where they're going to get lost or try to find something. This is one way to do it. I've seen folks use other kind of visual cues that are very simple in order to help their audience keep on track with what information is most related to what. Again, when you're doing this, you need to be pursuing something that is not busy. It needs to not be complicated. It needs to not present a lot of different visual information. You're trying to help them focus and organize all of the stuff that you're presenting on so that they can basically reserve cognitive power to understanding your work instead of not getting lost in the structure of your poster design. Beyond your layout, the figures that you're using, as I said before, graphs, charts, your outcomes of your statistical tests, your data visualization, whatever you want to call it, whatever it may be, needs to be easy for your audience to understand individually. What that means is that if you've got a couple of different statistical figures or graphs, you may not want to put all of the results of each test on the same figure if that means you're going to have 4 to 6 or more different colored lines in one graph. If that is necessary, if that is the best way to communicate what it is that you are doing, then there's merit in pursuing that approach. But if you can separate that out so that they can very clearly see each result separately, and if you're trying to draw parallels, you're trying to make connections between different outcomes, you may want to separate them and then overlap them later in a different component. And so let's say we've got section here, so we've got 3 different graphs right here. And then you could possibly put in another one over here that is a combination of the 3. And so you start with like, oh, this one's just got this line, and this one has this other line, and then this one's got this line right here. And so what you can do is then, if you want to do all of them, that's great, but you can isolate as well as overlap to show the relationships between these individual things. This is fine to do. Again, it depends on what's going to make the most sense for you effectively communicating the work that you're doing. If this approach that I'm describing does not make the most sense for you, don't do that. Do the thing that, after you know your work best, do the thing that is going to help your audience best understand clearly what your work was that you did, your methods, the results that you got, and then the outcomes, the results, and then the discussion later on. Make sure that you are keeping everything nice and clear and clean and not getting busy and all the other stuff that we've been talking about. It's very easy to fall into these traps because you want to show everyone everything that you did. You're proud of it. You want to really put it all out there. The problem that can happen with doing that sometimes is that you overstuff the poster that you're presenting, which makes it a lot harder for your audience to find the core, really cool thing that you did amongst all the other stuff that you're really excited about, but your audience doesn't really need. We are staying away from posters that are cluttered, that are busy, or anything like that. We're keeping our poster nice and clean, a good flow to the information that we're presenting, and we're not creating needless burdens for our audience by making things messy or making them have to work really hard to find things. Ideally, somebody should be able to go start to finish on your poster without you telling them anything, in between 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a long time to stand there and read something. You're probably better off closer to the 5 minute mark. But if somebody is really interested in it, I know I've done this. If it's a poster about something that I am really interested in, I may read things more than once and really sit there and stare at the graphs for a little while longer. But that's kind of what you should be shooting for. If people are getting lost, either they're going to leave or it's going to take them longer than that. They're going to get impatient. They might get confused. And so again, we are making things nice and smooth for the folks that are coming to see what we've done. So I have made a bit of a change here. Instead of using those colored lines that I had before, just a reminder, we had these lines here a second ago around the boxes. We've gone to black lines around the boxes, but we're using these colored fields you can see here to isolate these areas. I want to point out that this is much easier on the eyes because you don't have a bunch of different lines all over the place that are like they're different colors and they're contrasting, and it just is it's a little harder to look at. Whereas this, you can still separate things into their different boxes, but everything that's related stays in its own little colored space. So you've got purple, yellow, green, red, etc. Now, something else to be mindful of, as a bit of a side note. Red-green color blindness and other forms of color blindness are a thing. There are websites that you can use that you can drop some kind of image that you have made, even a screen capture of a slide that you've made or your poster or what have you. And you can drop that into these websites, basically, and they will allow you to select different kinds of color blindness, and they'll show which kinds of color blindness are most common. And then you can test your visuals for how friendly they are to people who have these visual impairments. Making sure that you're at least paying attention to that and making things as easy as possible for those folks also is important. Now, you may just have enough going on in your visuals that you can't avoid the colors or shades of red and green. So what you're going to be doing there is going for making sure you're distinguishing between shades. You do not want a light red and a light green. You may want a light green and a dark red, so that even if they can't see those colors, they're going to be able to see a distinction in the maybe shades of gray that they can perceive if they're not able to see the colors themselves. So again, use these tools. They're really helpful, and they just show that you're, again, trying to be considerate of your audience when you're putting these things together. And so that is our poster. Again, these are very basic tips for putting stuff together. This is not meant to be something where it's like you must make it look exactly like I've laid it out here if you want it to be a good poster. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I've seen some really cool ones where it's almost radial, and there's the point is in the middle, and the title and all that is up here, and then they've got like some introduction, but then this is going out to like point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, and then they've got their acknowledgments down here. So again, as long as you are making sure that things flow neatly, especially if it's kind of a left to right or a center outward kind of direction, or even an outward inward kind of direction. All of these things are fine, but it needs to be consistent. If you aren't sure if what you're doing makes sense, or if it's easy for your audience to understand, put together a mock-up of it. Like, don't create a polished finished product, but like just kind of throw some stuff together and make it maybe about 40% done, and then just ask a friend or two to have a look at it. Can you follow this? And if they're like, hard no, absolutely not, that may be a sign to you that you need to revise how you're structuring things or how you're wording it. Especially if you can get folks who are maybe in the same department as you, who have taken similar classes, and there's not going to be a huge knowledge barrier. Folks that have a similar background, they're not going to get hung up on terminology quite as much, and you'll be able to get better feedback on the structure of your poster, quality of your visuals, and stuff like that. So I hope this has been helpful. Please leave any comments or anything down below if you have other questions about how to put together posters, and I'll be happy to check in on once in a while and address those. If you're going to be presenting a poster at a meeting soon, good luck. You're going to do great. You've done a lot of really cool work. Just make sure that you follow some of these basic strategies, and your poster will be much friendlier towards the folks who are coming to chat with you about the stuff that you've done.